Dave Talks Comics, Episode 68. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comic books and cartoons, I will probably spoil them in some way. On this episode, I will be talking about two anime series that I've been watching recently. Space Pirate Captain Harlock from the 1970s and Sword Art Online from just a few years ago. Captain Harlock, or Space Pirate Captain Harlock, is an anime series, a Japanese cartoon. It ran for approximately 1 year from March of the original run of this cartoon was from March of 78 to February of 79. It was originally a manga series that was created by Leiji Matsumoto, and there was 5 volumes of the manga. And then it was subsequently, so that must have been before 78. And then subsequently, there was this animation that was created from it. The animation was directed by a director by the name of Rintaro. And I looked him up, but I don't think I've seen any of his other work. And most of his work was in the 70s and 80s, at least television shows from what I could see. But he's still alive, as is Matsumoto. They are both alive and both still creating. Matsumoto is probably best known, or his best known work is Space Battleship Yamato, which in the United States is known as Starblazers. And yeah, so I mean that was one of my first interactions with anime. Not my first, but one of my first interactions with anime. One of the first animes I saw. It's a shame that isn't available in. It's available on DVD, but it's dubbed, and I prefer the subtitled versions. This version that I'm watching is subtitled, not dubbed. This is available on DVD. It's also, I'm watching it on Crunchyroll, which is an anime streaming service, and I believe it is also available through Hulu, but I'm not certain of that since I don't have Hulu. So Captain Harlock is both the name of the series and the main character. Captain Harlock is an outlaw who fights for Earth despite being hunted by Earth's defense forces, and I put it that way because it seems the way the series is going so far, and I'm 8 episodes in to this 42-episode run. And as I understand it, this is a complete story. The Earth's defense forces, so I believe there was supposed to be one world government at this point, and I cannot remember what year or if they even specify what year this is supposed to take place in, but obviously it's supposed to be the future because you have he is an outlaw who has a spaceship called the Arcadia, he being of course Captain Harlock, and it's kind of cool looking. It looks like a spaceship on the front, but kind of the back end looks like one of those old school pirate ships from hundreds of years ago. So I think that's kind of neat. Captain Harlock's a character whose picture I had seen time and time again over the years, but this is my first time watching the anime, and so far I think it's really good. So let me tell you a little bit more about the show. One of the other characters who kind of is the point of view character for the viewer is a guy by the name of Tadashi Daiba, and he's a young man whose father is killed very early in the series, I think in the 3rd episode, or maybe it's the 2nd episode, actually. But his father is trying to warn the government about these... There's something that arrives from space. I'm not sure how to describe it. I read, actually, whether it's a kind of a buoy or something like that, this huge thing that arrives from space, crashes, and it's got some message on it in a language that's very hard to decipher, but Tadashi's father deciphers it, and he's convinced that these aliens are coming to invade, and he tries to warn them, and then he gets killed by the aliens. Now the aliens, Tadashi's father, whose name is Tsuyoshi Daiba, and so Tadashi's father gets killed by the aliens, who are called the Mazon, and the Mazon are basically, I think, the bad guys throughout the entirety of this series, at least from what I've been able to read on the internet, through Wikipedia and other websites. That's the way it appears to me. They are aliens who look like women but aren't women, and their supreme leader is named Queen La Fresia. And the other thing that I was thinking about this, and the name Mazon kind of sounds like Amazon. And so I'm thinking that maybe they took it from there. That's where the name comes from, since they look like women, but they aren't actually, well, since they look like women. Well, anyway, that's my thinking, although I have found absolutely nothing to back that up or anything to explain what the origin of the name Mazon is. Tadashi's mother was also killed earlier, before the series began, in an attack on Triton, which is one of the moons of Neptune. She was somebody who had warned the government of Earth that they needed help, they needed support, and they were ignored and they were attacked, and then she was blamed by the government for what happened. And so basically Tadashi, there's no love lost between he and the government. And so once his father is killed, although it isn't like he jumps into it 100%, he basically ends up becoming a member of Captain Harlock's crew, because after seeing his father get killed and after getting saved by Captain Harlock, because he probably would have been killed himself as well by the Mazon. Now, one of the interesting things about the Mazon is they tend to die by being burned. So if they get shot, they kind of turn into flame. I think one of the names of one of the episodes is the women who, let me see, the lady who burns like paper. And so this series, I mean, it's got a certain amount of violence to it, you know. It's not, certainly when you see Tadashi's father get killed, that's pretty violent, you know, him getting a hole blown right through him. And the way these women, or these aliens who look like women, die, you know, getting burned up, that's fairly violent. It's not the kind of stuff that you were seeing on American cartoons at the same time. There's a few other crew members on the Arcadia, Captain Harlock's ship. One of them is Kay, who is a human woman, a navigator. She's the navigator and the science officer. And then there's an alien woman named Mime, who is the last survivor of her race, and she tends to drink alcohol and plays a harp. And then there's Yataran, who is the first mate, and he's kind of comic relief, but he kind of leaps into action when needed. One of the things that you see on this show is that one of the things that Yataran explains to Tadashi when he joins the crew is that basically the crew members are free to do whatever they want unless they're under attack, and then they have to leap into action, which is basically what you see him doing. He is very kind of laid back and lackadaisical. You see him building models, and you know, like model planes, model ships, and but then once they're under attack, all of a sudden he's all action. And there's a few other members of the crew, but that's about it for now. A couple things about the story so far is that they've discovered that there are signs that the Mazon have been to Earth before, like they discovered this pyramid that's on the ocean floor that's in the Bermuda Triangle, and that was kind of neat. There's an episode called The Phantom Mazon, which of course made me laugh because it sounds like the Phantom Zone, and I'm sure it could have been translated as the Ghost Mazon or something like that, but I have to think that whoever was in charge of doing the translating did that on purpose, the Phantom Mazon. On the whole, I would say, the animation here, if you've ever seen the original, like Starblazers or the old Robotech cartoons from the early 80s, late 70s, the animation's or Battle of the Planets, or G-Force. The animation is kind of that era. So it's certainly not of the quality of what you'd expect to see today. But I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I like how the story's evolving. It's not one of these things where every episode's about a big fight. You actually are seeing the progression of the story, and I think that's really cool. And I'm planning to continue to watch this all the way through. I mean, at this point, I'm 8 episodes in, so I'm about 20% of the way into it. I've watched about a fifth of the story, and I'm enjoying it, I mean, it's not as deep as some other things, and you don't get quite the emotional points that you do get in some episodes, although, like I said, with the violence, you do see Tadashi going through quite a bit. As I said, he is the kind of point of view character for the viewer. He's the one who you see him go through quite a bit in adjusting to being on the ship, and you see him go through a certain amount of. He's got this fever desire to get revenge for what happened to his parents, and. So you do see the evolution of his character, him learning to adjust to being on the Arcadia as opposed to living on Earth. There's a couple other things I haven't mentioned. There is at least 2 other characters that are worth mentioning. One is a young girl who lives on Earth, who is the daughter of the man who built the Arcadia, who was the man who built the Arcadia was the friend of Captain Harlock. And Tochiro Oyama is the name of the guy who built the Arcadia. And so his daughter's name is Mayu, and she lives on Earth, and the leader of the Earth's Defense Forces quite frequently, at least through the first 8 episodes, at least on a couple occasions, has used her as kind of a pawn to try to lure Captain Harlock in so he can capture him. And that's the other person I want to talk about. And his name is Mitsuru Kiruda, and he is the leader of the defense forces of the Earth, and he kind of has this thing out for Captain Harlock. He wants to capture him. He doesn't matter what Captain Harlock's doing to battle the Mazon or to help the Earth. He sees Captain Harlock as an outlaw and wants to bring him down. And at least a couple of the episodes so far have focused very strongly on that. So that's about it for Captain Harlock for now. As I said, I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to continue watching it. It's available on DVD. It's available on Crunchyroll, and I believe it's also available on Hulu. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Sword Art Online is an anime, a Japanese cartoon. It's currently available on Netflix and on Crunchyroll. It is not dubbed, it's subtitled, at least from what I can tell. It's subtitled, and I prefer to watch subtitled animes, so that's fine with me. The setting is a virtual reality game. The main character is a teenager by the name of Kirito, who is a former beta tester of this game. It's a kind of a fantasy virtual reality game, and he logs on to play on the first day this game goes live, is out of beta testing, I guess, and he and all of the thousands of other players who have also logged on quickly find themselves trapped in this game. Whoever designed the game, whoever's running the game, they are all trapped in the game. They cannot disconnect from the game. If anybody attempts to disconnect them from the game, then they will be killed by some sort of an electric current or something like that comes through their headset, their virtual reality headset. So basically, they're trapped in the game, and the story all takes place, with the exception of a couple scenes at the very beginning, at least through the first 7 episodes that I've watched so far, inside the game. So I don't play these games a whole lot. I did play Dungeons and Dragons when I was younger, so I kind of like it for that reason, because I kind of like seeing how people play things out. And so basically the players all start on the first level, and they've got to work their way to the 100th level, and the only way to get out of the game is apparently to beat the game. At least that's what they're told by the guy who has trapped them there. And so it kind of, that's the setting for the game. Like I said, the main character's name is Kirito, and he was a beta tester, which gives him a definite advantage. He quickly becomes one of the most powerful players in the game, and part of what they keep referring to as the lead group, which is kind of, I guess, the upper echelon of the players. And he's ridiculously strong, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Now the game is kind of a setting for this. It's not, each episode is not about playing through a level or something like that. In fact, I don't know if I would like it that much. It's more about Kirito and his relationships with other players who he encounters. He doesn't, a lot of the players form teams or guilds. He does not, although there is one episode where he joins a guild, and that doesn't go so well. But he does take part. He does interact with a lot of different players, quite often to help them out, because quite often they don't have a lot to offer him. So, let's see, what else is there to say about this? Yeah, I said that the focus seems to be on his relationships with other players, a lot of whom are girls of his age, and most of whom develop crushes on him. And so a lot of it has to do with, them trying to figure out how they really feel about him. And so it's a bit of a harem anime in that respect. I wouldn't say there's a lot of fan service in this. I think there's a little bit, but I'd say for the most part it's fairly tame in that respect. It is worth saying that not everything goes well, that you see a number of characters, a number of players get killed in the process of these stories. And it's, like I said, each story is not about beating a level, or each episode, and each episode is not about beating a level, and there isn't, from episode to episode, each episode is like a separate story for the most part. Within the first 7 episodes, there is one 2-parter, but other than that, each of these episodes, they don't end on cliffhangers, and one doesn't pick up right where the previous episode left off, for the most part, with the exception of that 2-parter, which is episodes 5 and 6. There is one recurring character. There's a few characters who show up more than once, but there's one girl who, there seems to be a budding romance between Kirito, and her name is Asuna, and she is also one of the lead group. In other words, she's also about as strong as he is, and as skilled as he is. Her weapons, her abilities, and so on and so forth are just as strong. But not everybody is cooperative. I mean, some players are downright evil, and so some of the episodes deal with that, with him trying to defend other players against some of these evil characters. I mentioned that there was an episode where he joins a guild. That was the third episode, where he joins the Moonlit Black Cats Guild. And that doesn't go too well. He kind of plays down how strong he is, and the result is that they start thinking that they're better than they actually are, because he's actually kind of filling in for them a bit. He's doing more than they realize he's doing in these dungeon encounters when they're fighting monsters. And I don't want to give the episode away, but basically it ends kind of tragically. Let's put it that way. Let's see, is there anything else? Well, there's a couple of episodes where he hangs out with other people, helping them to attain certain goals, complete certain missions. There's the two-parter, which is kind of a Sherlock Holmesian kind of episode or story, and I say that because it's kind of, here's an impossible situation. There's an impossible murder that happens where somebody seems to get killed within a town, and apparently within the game players are not supposed to be able to kill other players in the town. And eventually he figures out what is actually going on, and it isn't that people are being killed, but there's a reason why he's seeing what he's seeing, or why what's happening is happening. And I don't know if the show is for everybody. I like it. I like the whole virtual reality setting and the whole idea of these players being trapped in. At least I like it so far, through 7 episodes. As I understand it, there are 2 seasons of this show, and I think there's another season that's also, I think, virtual reality based, but I think it's in a different game that's being planned. This anime was not based on a manga, as I understand it, but was based on a series of novels, Japanese novels, which I think have been translated into English, but I'm not sure. And I think are under the same name, Sword Art Online. So I'm really enjoying this show. I think it's worth watching. It's 26 episodes in the first season. I think 25? Maybe it's 25 episodes in the first season. I think about the same in the second season. I think there's also a movie that takes place between the two, I think. But anyway, I really like this. If it sounds like something you'd like, virtual reality, fantasy setting, I would recommend that you check it out, because I think it's a really entertaining show. I've done a little more research on Captain Harlock and Sword Art Online, and here's what I found. Captain Harlock is set about 1,000 years in the future. The original show came out in the late 70s, and from what I found online, it's supposed to take place in the year 2977. So that would be basically 1,000 years in the future, kind of like the Legion of Superheroes from DC Comics, I guess. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that there are a lot of sequels to this series, and it's not, some of them rewrite the story. Some of them, as I understand it, I haven't seen any of them, use the characters in different ways. Same characters, some bring in new characters. I haven't seen any of them. There is one movie on Netflix, which I believe is called Captain Harlock, or Space Pirate Captain Harlock, or something along those lines. I haven't watched it. I will probably give it a try once I finish watching this series. But I can't attest to how good or how bad it is, and I'm not even sure if it was made by the same director or not. Moving on to Sword Art Online. One thing I didn't realize, I knew that this series takes place, it's all about virtual reality worlds, and it takes place in more than one virtual reality world over the course of the series. But I thought that the first season was all set in one world, but I understand it now, it isn't. It's just the first 14 episodes that take place in this world in which the series begins. That's called Aincrad, Aincrad, I'm guessing on the pronunciation. And then the last 11 episodes of the first season take place in another world called Alfheim, which is another kind of fantasy, but I don't think fairies and more magic based as opposed to swords and sandals type setting. I guess there's some magic in the world that the story begins in, but I really don't know. I haven't even seen screenshots, or if I have, I wasn't aware of it. So I'm not even sure what it looks like, but it does continue with at least the same main character, and then the second season, Sword Art Online 2, jumps into yet another virtual reality game. And I'm not sure exactly what the continuing thread is between these all, other than the same main character. And then finally, I want to talk about another series that I really like, just briefly, and that's Cowboy Bebop. And this is, I think, a classic anime series. I can't remember exactly when it came out. I think it's early 2000s. That's about when I saw it, or maybe it was late 90s. And it is about three bounty hunters, Jet, Spike, and Faye. And it's kind of about their search for, in part for identity. It's about confronting their past, but it's all these missions that they go on. And it all kind of adds up to this one big story. And they each have their own threads going through this, but they're all interacting. And there's other, they all live on this ship, but they, and so they travel. It's set in the future. It's science fiction, although it's science fiction with bounty hunters. But I'm not sure exactly when it takes place in the future, but it's set in a distant future. And so they're based off of the ship, and they're going on these missions to earn money so that they can keep the ship running. And at the same time, they're also meeting people from their past. Sometimes who they remember, sometimes who they don't. Sometimes people who remember them, although they don't remember them. And you also have a little bit in there with a couple of other crew members on this ship. And I've watched it twice. I watched it probably about 10, 12 years ago. And then I watched it again about probably 4 years ago, something like that. I thought it was great both times. And I'm at the point where I'm thinking about, I've only rented it. I'm thinking about buying it because I don't own it. And it's basically just one season. It's 26 episodes. Plus there's a movie. The movie really, I think, takes place between two of the later episodes, like episode 22 and 23 or something like that. And it's kind of, you could watch it or you don't need to watch it. But anyway, this is a really great series, or at least this is one of my favorite series, and I've heard a lot of people talk very favorably about it as far as a gateway series. There are other series I could talk about that I've enjoyed, but that was one that I wanted to highlight for just now. That's it for episode 68 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com, on Twitter at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be finishing up my coverage of the Micronauts Special Edition miniseries from Marvel Comics by covering issues 4 and 5. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.